The world's third major manufacturing bloc is under the North American Free Trade Agreement, an economic alliance of Canada, Mexico, and the United States. The NAFTA system is utterly unlike its competitors. There is far and away a dominant player, the United States, of course, but that player is also the most technologically advanced. Canada exists at a similar wage and tech level, so what integration exists is largely concentrated where Detroit, Michigan meets Windsor, Ontario, the core of the northern lobe of North American automotive manufacturing. The single bridge connecting the two cities carries more cargo traffic by value than America's total trade with all but its top 3 trading partners. There are 2 bits of magic in the manufacturing of North America. The first is within the United States itself. America is a big place. In terms of flattish, usable land, it is easily twice the size of either Europe or China, both of which have vast swaths of nigh useless territories that are mountainous or desert or tundra. Both have built up about as large a population as they can manage, while the Americans could easily double their population and still have loads of spare land, which is precisely what's likely to happen by the end of the 21st century. America may not have the wage variation that exists throughout Asia and to a lesser degree in Europe, but it more than makes up for it with geographic variation. Different parts of the United States have wildly different costs for food, electricity, petroleum products, and land. Each region has its own unique characteristics. Cascadia is known for its left-wing politics, hefty regulation, unionized environment, but most importantly, sky-high urban land costs. Seattle sits on an isthmus, while Portland is squashed between highlands. Both boast traffic as epic as their property prices. The only saving grace from a cost point of view is the region's cheap electricity. Hooray, hydropower. The only play the Pacific Northwest has in the world of manufacturing is to move upmarket and provide the highest value add possible. This is the land of Boeing and Microsoft. The American Northeast is tight. High land costs, high labor costs, overloaded infrastructure, high regulatory barriers, heavily unionized, densely populated cities, nearly zero green space to be had. Most manufacturing has long since decamped the region, leaving behind a weird bifurcation. First are the legacy corporations that date back nearly to the country's industrialization, such as GE, Raytheon, and Thermo Fisher Scientific. None produce all that much locally, but corporate headquarters and intensive design work both call Massachusetts home. Second, what stuff is still built here has been shaped by ever-rising costs for siting, labor, and regulatory compliance. It is a merger of industry and brain work, biomedical, system controls, scientific instruments, aeronautical and navigational devices, electrical systems, and the design, final assembly, and refurbishment of a variety of aerospace, maritime, and naval hardware. Above all, the Northeast is where the training takes place for the brain work that drives all American manufacturing everywhere. After all, the Northeast is home to Yale, Harvard, and that most hallowed hall of nerds, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. The Front Range, where I hang my hat these days, and the Arizona Sun Corridor are a world apart. Land is dirt cheap. Regulations are for the bonfire. But there just aren't all that many people, and the cities are certainly not close together. The combined population of the two zones' urban corridors isn't much more than 10 million, and the drive from Colorado Springs, the southern extreme of the very extended Denver metro, to Albuquerque is a cool 4 hours. And even that only if the traffic is light, the weather is good, and the cops are asleep. Between very limited economies of scale and high in-region transport costs, standard manufacturing supply chains are almost out of the question. The solution? Tech servicing and all-in-one manufacturing hubs that don't heavily integrate with the rest of the country unless it makes sense for the product to be flown. This is the corner of America getting into high-end semiconductor fabrication of the Japanese and Taiwanese style. The Gulf Coast is Energy Alley. Petroleum and natural gas are both produced and processed there. The shale revolution has so deluged the region in vast volumes of low-cost, high-quality hydrocarbons that the region is busy expanding its industrial plant to make not just intermediate products like propylene and methanol, but increasingly down-market products like safety glass, diapers, tires, nylon, plastics, and fertilizer. The biggest problem? Siting can be a bit of a bitch. Big refineries need maritime access and lots of space. Still, this region lucks out in two ways. First, the Texas coast sports an extensive chain of barrier islands that provide it with more shielded port potential than all of Asia. And the lower Mississippi in southern Louisiana isn't even remotely shabby either. Second, most American petrochemical facilities were built with lots of standoff distance. Working with large volumes of oil and natural gas at high temperatures can be dangerous work. At least some of that empty space can be converted and is being converted into yet more industrial capacity. A region that consistently surprises to the upside is the American Piedmont. Sub-average educational system, semi-rugged terrain that both increases transport and land costs while limiting opportunities for integration and economies of scale. Limited options for river transport. Doesn't feel like the South should be very successful. But the locals more than make up for the shortcomings with oppressively felonious levels of charm. Rather than wait for investors to come to them, Southerners venture out to potential investors the world over, typically bringing with them their delegation's combined body weight in bourbon to smooth over any cultural barriers. Fun fact. When hard-drinking American Southerners meet with equally hard-drinking Koreans, the result is one of those irresistible force, immovable object contests. Once the Southerners inebriate, land an investor, they then set to work back home to create the perfect customized business environment. Infrastructure is expanded, the workforce is exquisitely tailored not just for the investor's business, but for specific jobs. Tax laws are changed. And the Southerners do what they do best, make outsiders feel like they're part of the family. Embarrassingly little American investment drives the South. But foreign investment? Everywhere. The American South has become a playground for Germany's VW and Mercedes-Benz, Japan's Honda, Mazda, Nissan, and Toyota, Korea's Hyundai and Kia, and Sweden's Volvo. Even persnickety Airbus has facilities in Charleston, South Carolina, and Mobile, Alabama. Florida. You go to Florida for the beaches, Disney World, and retirement, not to manufacture stuff. And we're walking. The Great Lakes region was once known as America's Steel Belt. A bit of canal work in the mid-1800s connected the Northeast to the Great Lakes and Greater Mississippi, making this region the greatest integrated manufacturing zone on the planet. For a time. During the Great Depression, the Americans adopted something known as the Jones Act, which forced any cargo shipped between any two American ports to use only vessels that were American-built, owned, captained, and crewed. That, put conservatively, increased the cost of water transport in the United States by a factor of 5. What made this region special and successful? Withered. Add in international competition during the globalization age, and the region has since been reimagined as the Rust Belt, despite arguably having the nation's best educational system. Manufacturing still exists, of course. Illinois is home to none other than John Deere, with the bulk of the continent's large farm equipment even today manufactured in the Midwest. Detroit is no slouch, but neither is it the region's norm. Instead of mass volume, heavily integrated systems, most players are on the small side, heavy into highly technical custom work, and often supplying specialty parts to Texas. The Texas Triangle comprises the cities of Houston, Dallas-Fort Worth, Austin, and San Antonio. From a manufacturing point of view, the Triangle has it all. Cheap food, cheap power, cheap land, no income tax, minimal corporate tax, hilariously light regulations. And that won't change. Hell, the Texas legislature